Yeah, I don't know if it's so much like a lingering sense of doom, but for a really long time, like it there was always like waiting for the other shoe to drop, especially around men. It was always like I don't know if I can really trust you. And even now, like I'll notice those creep up, but now I have the tools to sort of like help me combat that.
Okay, that's really good. So I loved your book and I just loved the whole thing. I mean, it was written really well. Like you used such striking imagery. And a line that really stood out to me was, "Instead, I choose a pen over a knife." The openness about how you felt as a result of a sexual trauma, the suicidal ideation that you felt, is something I really appreciate you doing. For me, that metaphor like demonstrated that like that transferring your pain into art. And so, for listeners out there, what was the process like healing from that kind of ideation, or what do you think they could take away from your journey?
Yeah, so that was a really, really lengthy process. And I think when the pain and when the when it goes that deep, when you don't want to be here anymore, when you don't see the point, when you don't think you matter, when you don't think you should be here, you're worthy of being here, it can be a very like lengthy process, and that can maybe seem discouraging at first, but it's like think about it. Whatever happened to get you here took a while. It wasn't just a one and done kind of thing. So it took me quite some time, and there were a lot of little changes that needed to be made, things like making sure there's a lot of sunlight in my room at all times, that I go outside every single day, that like my room is clean and things like that, that were like little changes that need to be made it in order so I could make the big changes, like going to therapy, like actually noticing the way in which I talk to myself inside my own head, and taking the steps and the awareness to try to change that and to speak to myself with much more love and compassion. And and yeah, it took some time, and it's ongoing, and not every day is easy, but I get a little bit better at it every day.
Yeah, and it's like you said before, those things are usually like given like flack, especially like when it's like social media like teams or like organizations like tell people that we're trying to mentor, like like do little things, go outside, go for a walk. It seems people see it as like so shallow, but it is really important just to get step outside. It's the little things which allow you to do the bigger things. You can't like expect to one day wake up and see be magically fixed. It is like you said a really long process to go through it in order to heal.
Yeah, the analogy I was making before the technical issue was like, if you want to bake a cake, the very first thing you need to do is go buy the ingredients. Buying the ingredients and having them isn't going to make the cake, but you're not going to be able to make that cake if you don't have the ingredients that you need. And I don't think you're really going to make a dent in your mental health journey if certain smaller changes haven't been made first.
That's an amazing analogy. Like that fits this so well. It really is so true. So I want to talk more about like how shame and guilt is a very common response to sexual assault. Like I went through similar feelings. I know a lot of people do, and I couldn't really understand why I felt like that. And I know you mentioned you also experienced similar emotions. So why do you think you felt like that?
I I've done enough work to really intimately understand that my sense of shame and guilt specifically came from my childhood upbringing. I was raised in a very traditional Catholic home, and genuinely raised within the church to believe that if, for example, with what happened to me, I was to blame. I tempted good men. It was, well, I had a reputation, and well, what was I wearing? And did I say no? Did I scream? Did I fight back? It was like, then, did you really not want it? And all those things that were going on inside my head that just made me completely doubt my own experience and be like, yeah, the complete shame that came with it. It's like the slut shaming we talk about usually coming from society. It's like, but at some point it becomes so ingrained within you that you don't even need society to do it anymore. You're doing it to yourself.
Yeah, I really hate how like sometimes religion is interpreted to, like, put men on a pedestal and, like, view women as these sinful, like, creatures who are just inherently sinful, like, the very existence is, gonna tempt men into sin, and it's not their fault as well. There's no sense of, like, I'm not sure what the word is, but, like, that there's no sense of blame or fault for them. It's always on someone else. It's always something external. They're so seemingly perfect. Like, it's such a disgusting issue. Like, hearing that dialogue, it just makes me so angry, because it's like, how could that possibly be true? Like, how could you not, you know, take the blame for your own, like, actions? You're also, like, a person with, like, reason and just, a brain. Surely you should understand what consent is. You shouldn't have to be screaming and kicking to say, I don't want this.
Yeah. And a lot of women feel too afraid in the moment, or you go into fight or flight, and it's like just such a shock to a system that you're just like frozen because you can't believe what's happening is what's happening. Which anybody who's experienced, like, for example, a car accident or anything just like so instantly traumatic, you're like, what's going on? Like, you can't process for a few moments. And I think that's mistaken for consent. And I'm like, no, my inability to process the shock of what you're doing to me is not my consent.
Exactly, and just it's so weird to me how, like, the crime is dependent on how you react to it. It's still a crime. Like, other violent crimes don't have that same, oh, if someone, like, came to, like, stab someone, oh, you didn't react, you didn't say no, that means you wanted it. Like, that's not how it works. It just boggles my mind.
If someone came along and stole my purse as I was walking down the street, and I was like so unaware of it happening that I didn't even scream, and by the time I thought to scream, he was already down the block. So then my rational brain kicks in and said, there's no point in screaming. Like, that doesn't mean I didn't just get mugged, and I
Exactly.
did not.
Yeah, it doesn't take away from that. Like, it just makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, with your book, oh, sorry. So, did you ever feel that love is kind of, like, cringe and unreal? And I say that because I wonder that if you ever kind of or have or had that faith in the idea that it would take a certain person to help you get over the wall. In your case, like, being a defensive shield built from your experiences, like you said, these were men that you thought you could trust.
Yeah, I think I did for a really long time after, just like not even really believe in the idea of love, because I was like, I genuinely didn't feel like men were capable of the kind of love that I had experienced with so many women, the kind of love that felt so safe and so honest, so real. I was accepted for me. It had nothing to do with how I looked in any given moment, nothing to do with my sex appeal. But I do think I fell into a kind of confirmation bias loop of I believed men were incapable of that kind of love. And so I was attracting and only really looking for evidence of men that were incapable of that kind of love. And, there was a moment in Bali, I think it was 2018, and I met this one I met this one man, and he did kind of like, I think he like meeting him and spending time with him really planted the seed of doubt in my mind that was really beneficial to my future healing journey, because he treated me like a friend in a way that no other man that I had had a romantic relationship with had. Like, when we ended things, I wasn't discarded. We would still talk, we would still catch up with each other. Obviously, not in the same way because the romantic relationship was over, but he still genuinely cared about me as a human being and was like, how are you doing? And like, it sounds so sad to say that out loud, that I had never experienced that up until that point, but I think that's just the reality of most women's, unfortunately, their dating experiences, where you get so used to being discarded. Like, once I'm no longer meeting your romantic sexual needs, I hold no value for you, and I'm worthless to you. And I think that really starts to eat away at like your heart and your ability to believe that like a man could actually love you for you.
Yeah, something that starts so young, like, even in school, like, guys won't respect you if you're not pretty enough, or they don't find you attractive. And, like, me and Craig were having this conversation earlier, and we were talking about, like, PE lessons, so, like, sports lessons. And it was like, oh, when the girls and the guys would, like, have lessons, like, mixed together, it was the guys were groaning and, like, getting so angry that girls were on their team, and so the girls felt so, like, disinclined to, like, actually try and play sports, and they just felt so, like, pissed off by that. So they only just cared about, like looking pleasing for the guys, because if it was sweating, that was unattractive. So
Mm.
but then when we were playing by themselves, he noticed that they were actually playing, and they were actually good at sports. But some of it, but the ones but they're just so uncomfortable around men to actually like just be themselves. And I just really noticed that growing up, and it's so sad that kind of thing starts when you're literally like 11 years old. That you have to like impress men. You have to live up to their expectations. Otherwise, they're gonna discard you. You're not worthy enough for them. If you're not attracted to them, they won't care about you. They won't even see you as a person a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, society is feeding both little boys and little girls the same message. You value women based on how they look.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Pretty sad.
Like, I used to tutor kids, and I just noticed the way they talked about girls at such a young age was vile. And I didn't have that when I was growing up, and I'm not that much older than them. And it's just like everything with social media and the things they're exposed to, it's just so disgusting. It was honestly just like horrific. I just really like feel so bad for the future generation of women who are going to have to deal with men who look at girls on like social media and think, well, that's the only value they have, her better appearance.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, it's so hard to think about.
yeah, it's really sad. Um, so we've gone through your journey with like how your book came to be and all the experiences that led up to it. So I was just wondering, how are you today? How is everything now?
Today's today's pretty good. Obviously, like the current moment of my life is I mean there are up days and there are down days, and I'm mostly just proud of myself for how much better I handle the down days than I used to. I think bringing to my awareness, I think what was really pivotal in my healing journey was realizing, I think for a while, I was really naive and I was like, oh, eventually, like I'll be so healed, there will not be any more low days, no more low moments. I won't be there. Like that's what I was striving for. And then when I changed my perception and it was like, no, those low days are going to keep happening because life is hard and I've been through a lot and my past is never going to go away. And so realizing I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to get rid of the low days. That's an impossible goal. I'm trying to create the tools within myself to handle those low days better. And I'm really, really proud of how far I've come in the way I handle those low days. And instead of, you know, turning inward and shaming myself and hating myself and speaking to myself so cruelly, it's I turn outward and I reach out for help and I seek out community and I admit my vulnerability and I say, hey, I'm struggling today. Can I have a hug? Can I spend the day with you? I just need to be around somebody. Maybe let's go on a picnic. I won't be that much fun, but it's going to make a huge difference in my day. Like, and to be able to ask for help when I need it is really big in a way that like people who are already good at that can never understand how big it is.
Yeah, it is a really unhealthy like narrative. I know like a lot of my friends have said like, "Oh, it's never gonna get better. I still have those days," but realistically, they can never go away. Like you said, it's about how you deal with them, because the things that have happened to you, they're with you for the rest of your life. They alter you. They're not gonna go away with like therapy sessions or like mental health like breaks. Like no matter what you do, they will always be there. So it's very important to just kind of understand that, like you said, do those little things and just make sure you don't let yourself like spiral and like keep like fully forcing yourself in that bad space and not finding ways to like help yourself get out of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this amazing resource on my website. I call it my emotional emergency care kit. And it's this box that I like decorated and made myself. And it's full of letters from like friends and trusted family. And I told them, I'm like, this is something I'm going to turn to in the days when I'm right back to where I'm like, I'm not sure whether or not I want to be here. So they were fully aware of like what the intention of their letter was supposed to be. And it's so helpful of having that reminders of like, I am loved, there are people here who need me. I wrote a letter to myself of like, don't forget you need you. Like, it's just full of like a bunch of things to just help me like ease at least slightly out of whatever mental state I find myself
I
in.
think that's an incredible idea, because it's really easy to just get stuck in that state and think like that's your life. But that's also, especially like writing letters to yourself, that's a really amazing idea. Can imagine be really helpful.
Yeah.
So I think now it's time to get more into like the writing process and like how your book actually came to be. So we wanted to ask you about like your decision to put this poetry book together. and how it must have been quite difficult for you to relive those moments. So, why did you do it?
I think if I had gone into it, like, I think if I had approached writing these poems with the intention of, I'm going to write a book, I think it would have been difficult to relive those moments with the awareness that every word that I wrote, that somebody else would see them. And I guess I'm really grateful for the fact that at least this, my first book, is entirely made of poems that I wrote for nobody other than me. And so it wasn't actually a painful experience reliving that, probably because I was like killing myself mentally over every single one of these moments for years. So finally getting it out, it felt like it was getting it out of me. Like I was like literally like taking these like parasites out and putting them somewhere else and giving them somewhere else to live. And so for me, the writing process was so cathartic. And it was, yeah, I was just, I was writing constantly. Like, I feel like if I had been writing with the intention to like publish a book, I feel like I would have struggled to sit down and write because that goal of like, oh, a book would have overwhelmed me. But every time I sat down to write, it was just for me. And I didn't decide to write or to put it into a book and share it until, I had a few of my friends that I did end up sharing them with, just trusted people I could trust, people I could share that part of me with. And they were like, you need to put these out. Like there are so many women out there who feel how you feel and who will feel so seen and so validated, and you could provide so much help by sharing your experience and by taking away that shame and taking away that isolation that comes with feeling like, oh, it's just me.
No, I love what you've done because, like, when I was reading your poems, it just felt so raw in a way that I hadn't seen before. There's lots of books that talk about sexual trauma, but it was so much more like personal and just emotional, and it felt like you could connect with it a lot more. Especially because, like, in your book, you like leave every other page intentionally blank for women who are reading it, so they can like work through what they've dealt with. And I was just wondering, if like, have you had women reaching out to you telling you about their experiences utilizing these pages for their own healing, and what did that feel like?
Yeah, I have actually. And every time it happens, it feels so amazing, and it just brings me back to the moment where I decided, where I made that decision to leave every other page blank, and I was talking through it with my editor, who's a very good friend of mine. He's, or not my editor, sorry, my graphic designer. He designed the cover of the book. And we were talking about what needed to be included. I'm like, definitely a trigger warning. And then I was like, okay, how can I include a trigger warning without like, okay, I know that these poems are going to trigger people. And I'm like, when I'm triggered, the best thing I can do is like start working through that. And I'm like, maybe some other women do it through drawing, I do it through writing, but just leaving
Mm.
space of, you don't have to just sit here with this book being triggered. I need to give you something to help with that trigger. It's like, here, this space is for you and for what you need to work through. And so, yeah, whenever women do like reach out, it's just incredible. It's so, I'm like, I'm just so grateful. I'm like, okay, this works.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just so validating what you've done. You know, you're really just giving them a physical space where they can just say, like, I've also been through something similar. It's like an invitation to do the same thing you've done, which I love so much because it is difficult to take that step.
Yeah.
So it's often said that artists expose the most intimate parts of themselves in their work, like we were kind of talking about before. But usually it's subtly, but you do it very explicitly. And like you said, like it wasn't your intention to share these poems to begin with. And poetry is also that place where everyone like really explores their own feelings, understands their own experiences. So how did it feel for you when your book was published and people could actually read your thoughts? Like, what was that like?
I I'm so lucky in the sense that I think, my title is um so uh decisive. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. But divisive. My
Yeah.
title is so divisive in the sense of like, I really don't get a lot of men reaching out to me who have bad intentions going into this. I think they see that and maybe they have bad, like, ugh, awful, like, ew, what is this feminist writing about? But like all of my readers have just been incredible women who are just like just been so sweet and said the most like uplifting, caring things of like they love my work, they feel seen by my work, they appreciate the fact that I've like published and shared it. And so I'm really lucky in the sense that it's been 99.9% positive.
I mean, yeah, I was going to ask, like, what would you say to men, like, on the face reading that title would think, like, be pissed off by and be like, you're, like, wagging, like, your finger at men?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if a man is really turned off by the title of my book and like I wouldn't even be like, "Oh, you need to read this." It's like work on your healing journey, get to the point where this wouldn't turn you off, and then read it. Like same with racism. It's like get to the point where you're not turned off by a book talking about white privilege and then read it, because then your heart's going to be open to hearing its message. If you come at it from your place of like racism, sexism, like, like wherever you're reaching a book with a good message, like you're not actually going to be open to hearing it. And so there's no point. You're at that point you're shouting at a deaf person.
Yeah, that's so true. It's just, like, forcing it, like, nothing's gonna change. It's just a place for them to, like, fuel their anger, their misogyny, whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated all the insights you had to give and just for having this conversation. It was really important and one that we're really excited to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like this, I don't know, this has just been such an incredible. I've done a few podcasts and this has been my favorite podcast to
Oh,
wrap it
thank you
off so
so
far.
much. That means a lot.